What's up, fight fans? This is Kurt DeVille with Counterpunch Boxing News, and I have some new news concerning Andre Ward, Errol, the True Spence, and Yordines Ugas. Get this. Andre Ward says that Spence versus Ugas winner should fight Terence Crawford. Wow. Of course, we know that Yordines Ugas and Errol Spence has a unification fight for the WBO and the WBC. And according to Andre Ward, they should fight Terence Crawford. He said Ward says he doesn't want to hear the naysayers' comments about a fight between Crawford and the IBF and WBC champion Spence won't sell. The problem is that the promoters would have to risk paying for the vast purses for a fight between the true Spence and Crawford, and they could lose a lot of money in the process. Crawford and Spence would both likely want $10 million each, and for those kind of purses to be covered, it would need to bring in a lot of pay-per-view buys. It wouldn't be a problem if one of the Middle Eastern countries were willing to plunk down a ton of money to make this fight happen, but that probably won't happen. When Crawford has fought on pay-per-view, he's done poor numbers, and there's no way of predicting whether his numbers would be any better against Spence. Ugas could upset the apple cart, though. Okay, as we all know, we've been hearing the possibility of Ugas. You guys know my take on Ugas. I like Ugas. You know, very experienced Cuban fighter. You know, very skilled, very underrated. You know, and I think he's poorly promoted, and I think they're intentionally promoted the way they are, because they're Cuban fighters. Anyway, it's not about Ugas. Not necessarily. Not all about Ugas. Spence or Ugas. More than likely, Spence will get the nod. You know, he beat Sean Porter. He beat the shit out of Danny Garcia. Kell Brook, he stopped Kell Brook. And that's pretty much the top guys on his resume. And, you know, that should be enough. All right. But will he beat Ugas? If he stops Ugas, that would be the only way that it could be legit. If he goes 12 rounds with Ugas and it's a close fight, they're going to give it to Spence. Why? Because Spence is more marketable. He's more sellable. They moved him right. You know, you have to look at the... you have to look at how they decided to promote Spence. They put a younger Mikey Garcia in there because he had the Mexican fan base. So when you talk about Spence's numbers, you have to consider like, hey, well, his numbers is big because they market him, they put him in there with a Mexican fighter, just the same way they did Floyd and De La Hoya. Okay, Floyd didn't do huge numbers until he was with De La Hoya, though. Okay, so it was like 2.1 or 2.2 million pay-per-view buys for that fight. But of course, he was fighting Oscar De La Hoya. He didn't do that in the Gotti fight or the Corrales fight or the Joppy fight. I mean, not the Joppy fight, the Corley fight. He didn't do that, right? He didn't make those numbers, but he did it with Oscar De La Hoya. So basically, Mayweather was marketed, you know, as a bad guy, so people didn't like him. So they came to watch him fight to lose. Spence, on the other hand, he did well against Danny Garcia, but I mean, he didn't do spectacular, you know. So if we look at his numbers, we're looking at the buys. See, it's 250,000 pay-per-view buys, okay? But if you look at the Garcia fight, okay, well, that's Danny Garcia. And let me see, Mikey Garcia. No, well, I mean, okay, well, 300,000 revealed, over 300,000 pay-per-view buys, still with over 250,000 buys at 75 a pop. That's pretty good. The Danny Garcia fight, it was at 250 pay-per-view buys. So, I mean, if you're looking at, that's not elite status. That's not bad, but it's not great. So the winner fighting each other, like, they're worried about pay-per-view sales. I think it's risk versus reward. See, if Errol Spence fights anybody else, it'll be around the same. Like the numbers we talked about. He made 300,000 pay-per-view buys against Mikey Garcia with a sold-out crowd, though, in the stadium. Because a lot of people came in attendance. But pay-per-view numbers pretty much stayed the same. When he fought Danny Garcia, it was 250,000. See what I mean? It wasn't 600,000 or 1,000,000 pay-per-view. None of that. Okay? And Terence Crawford doesn't do that well. Maybe it's the way they market him over their Top Rank. Maybe that's why one of the reasons he's trying to sue them right now. Right? So, you see that for what it is. But I'm with Andre Ward. Like, they should fight each other. See, one thing you don't want to see is Errol Spence in 2 years or so wanting to fight Terence Crawford then. You know what I mean? And then the money or all that shit wouldn't matter. You know why? Because the risk is not as high. Bars. Because they know, well, hey, because isn't Terence Crawford like 34 years old? He'll be 35 this year. He'll be 36 next year. So this time, next year, he turns 36, and all of a sudden, Errol Spence, which would be then 34, which he would still be in his prime, he can wait out that guy with that type of talent, And the question you ask yourself, will Terence Crawford still have that talent? Now, if he still has it, if he's somebody like Floyd or somebody that can carry, or Bernard Hopkins, they can carry that type of skill, Bernard and Floyd are totally two different fighters. But it's only a certain amount of time when you have that type of skill. But if Ugas beats, somehow, decisions, Errol Spence, there shouldn't be any reason for Terence Crawford and Ugas not to fight. It could be billed. They fought in the amateurs. Ugas beat him in the amateurs. That would be one hell of a fight. It would be kind of like, I would see that fight like, if you guys ever seen Ugas versus Delorme, it would be one of those fights. It would be some knockout, drag out type stuff, because these guys will be going toe to toe. Okay? And, because Terence Crawford, you hit him, he'll just get mad and starts fighting you. But he fights you with aggression as well as skill, but he's still a very, very aggressive fighter. He steps it up a notch, like he did with Mean Machine. Okay, so yes, I agree with Andre Ward, but that's if this fight happens. You guys tell me what you think about Andre Ward's comments. Of course, please subscribe, and you guys been Counterpunch.